see. There we go. That should do it. All right. I'm just going to assume that we are recording. If not, so be it. Welcome if you're out there. I cannot see your chats. I cannot see your comments, but I want to welcome you here. The intent of this video is to bring to you some wisdom and knowledge about reincarnation through this book. I'm going to read you excerpts from this book by Manly P. Hall, and it's called Reincarnation, the Cycle of Necessity. Now, many of you may come to my channel for my tarot readings every single month. I do 12 readings for all the 12 signs of the zodiac each and every month, and have done so for 8 years. But my channel is also, my YouTube channel is also about a broader range of metaphysical ideas, as well as ideas concerning health and well-being. When I decided to do this live podcast on reincarnation, I did so because the philosophy of the tarot is really very much influenced by the philosophy of Buddhism. And the philosophy of Buddhism has two primary tenets, foundations, ideas that are at its core. And those two ideas are reincarnation and karma. The tarot is not specifically about reincarnation, but it is about the evolution of your consciousness within the framework of life and death. That is birth and death. So it's about how in one life you can go through these incarnations, these evolutionary incarnations, where you better yourself, where you perfect your soul. So Manly Hall, if you don't know who he is a Canadian philosopher who lived last century, maybe died, I don't know, maybe in the 70s, something like that. And he was very much interested in the esoteric concepts as they appeared throughout history, throughout the ancient cultures particularly. So there are myriads, hundreds of lectures on YouTube by Manly P. Hall. So what I thought to do was not necessarily to read you the entire book, though I'd love to, because it is absolutely fascinating. But it is a treatise, a compilation of information and exploration of the concept of reincarnation. So what I thought to do in the beginning, as I said, I drew parallels to the philosophy of Buddhism and the tarot. So let's begin in this chapter here, where he talks specifically about Buddhism. Buddhism divided into two general schools of thought, within which flourished innumerable sects as has happened, by the way, with most of the religions. They've become divided, diversified into various sects. So it happened to Buddhism as well. These schools are called the Hinayana, or small cart, and Mahayana, the large cart. According to Pundit Hara Prasad Sastry, the principal goal of Hinayana school is the extinction or the absorption of the self. The virtues are practiced not for the common good of mankind, but for the liberation of the practitioner himself. So that's the branch of Buddhism that mostly monks and gurus who isolate themselves from the rest of humanity practice in order to, again, achieve absorption of self into what could be classified as the universal whole, into all that is. Therefore, this sect is regarded as essentially selfish, concerned only with their own good. Mahayana system, the other system, softens the austere philosophic atheism of primitive Buddhism. It clothes simple truths in elaborate symbolism. The simplest way of stating the matter may be to say that Hinayana remained a philosophy and Mahayana became a religion. Both schools agree on the subject or the subjects of reincarnation and karma. But it is said that the Mahayana, the big cart system, broadened the road to nirvana, to that blending, to that release, that escape into, the Christians call it heaven. So Mahayana, this system, broadened the road to nirvana and moved northward into Tibet, China, and the border states of India. Whereas Hinayana retired to Ceylon, where its scholars seek nirvana's bliss and reject the world. So just to understand these two branches of the cultural history of reincarnation, and he explores reincarnation in the various cultures around the world. So he has China, the law of rebirth in China and Japan, in the Greek culture, and he has reincarnation in Islam, reincarnation among the American Indians. So you can see that its span, its reach, went all over the world. Reincarnation among the American Indians is another name of a chapter. Reincarnation and the Old Testament, it's in there. And his next chapter is early Christian fathers on reincarnation. So how reincarnation, the concept was first accepted and then rejected in the Christian religion. And so we have all the way into Christendom. And I would like, though, to start to read to you from a chapter called Modern Believers in Reincarnation, which is perhaps a little philosophical, but I think that it gives us a very good introduction to the concept. Let's start. By the way, if you have any questions, please just, you can create a super chat if you'd like. And what I'll do is I'll create a separate video in which I will answer every one of them. But it's best that I be able to concentrate and to deliver the knowledge to you without interference. Modern Believers in Reincarnation. It is a habit of most men to agree with the great, the learned, or the powerful. According to Francis Bacon, we learn not only from experiment and observation, but from the testimony of those who have preceded us in time. It is important to many people to know that reincarnation was taught not only in the ancient world, but also in recent times. The doctrine of rebirth has survived the constant change of empire and is part of the philosophy of our modern world. Great men have believed in it. Wise men have sought to probe its mysteries. And brave men have dared to live by its laws. George Foot Moore, what a name, was an American clergyman, Bible scholar, and Orientalist. In his work, Metapsychosis, he writes, quote, "A theory which has been embraced by so large a part of mankind, of many races and religions, and has commended itself to some of the most profound thinkers of all time, cannot be lightly dismissed." Sensing the insufficiency of the orthodoxy he had left behind, the great Jewish philosopher Spinoza speculated on the eternity of man and the permanence of the mind in space. Quote, a quote from Spinoza: "It is impossible for us to remember that we had existence prior to the body, since the body can have no vestige of it. And eternity cannot be defined in terms of time or have any relation to time. But nevertheless, we have in our experience a perception that we are eternal." And isn't that the truth? Every one of us feels our eternal spirit. For the mind is sensible no less of what it understands than what it remembers. Although, therefore, we're still quoting Spinoza, although, therefore, we do not remember that we existed before the body, yet we perceive that our mind is eternal, insofar as it involves the body's essence under the category of eternity, and that its existence cannot be defined by time or interpreted by duration. Spinoza, the great philosopher Spinoza, understood that our spirit, our mind even, our thoughts even, must exist limits of time and space and physicality. Back up. From this quotation, it appears that Spinoza was groping towards the doctrine of metempsychosis, reincarnation. In his Monadoology, the great German philosopher Gottfried Wilhelm von Leibniz likewise indicated a tendency towards the acceptance of metempsychosis. He was an initiate of European mystical societies, suspected of being a Rosicrucian, and a profound student of Pythagoras and Platonic mathematics. His personal belief in reincarnation is quite possible. Then there was Francis Marie Voltaire, a satirical French philosopher and author, who summed up the matter of reincarnation with one pithy remark, quote, "It is not more surprising to be born twice than once. Everything in nature is resurrection." We move on to another character, one perhaps more familiar to you, Benjamin Franklin, who, as a poor boy, entered Philadelphia with a bun under each arm and was America's first philosopher, and according to the opinions of some, America's first gentleman. Now there's an accolade, isn't it, to be known as a country's first gentleman. This almanac maker, and he did make the almanac, the Farmer's Almanac, and ambassador, he was an ambassador as well, writes, quote, "Thus finding myself to exist in the world, I believe I shall, in some shape or other, always exist. And with all the inconveniences of human life that is liable to affect us, I shall not object to a new edition of mine, hoping, however, that the errata of the last may be corrected. The errors of the last may be corrected." So he's saying that he's hoping that as we incarnate, we perfect. And according, again, to Buddhism and many of these I wouldn't call them scholars, I'd say mystics who have incarnated higher spirits, higher evolved beings, that reincarnation is about the perfection of the soul. David Hume, a Scottish historian and philosopher, you may know these names, some of you, not many of you read philosophy, but the philosophy is what is the foundation of culture. And these philosophers are those who have contributed to shaping our culture. So David Hume, Scottish historian and philosopher, committed himself definitely to a belief in reincarnation. Quote, the soul, if immortal, existed before our birth. What is incorruptible must be ungenerable. Ungenerable. I see. What is incorruptible must be ungenerable, that you cannot destroy it. Metapsychosis is the only system of immortality that philosophy can hearken to. Moving on to philosophers like Lessing, Fitz, Herder. These are a list of the great philosophers who were believers in reincarnation. There is considerable evidence that the great poet and mystic Wolfgang von Goethe, probably my favorite writer in all of the world, I love Goethe, accepted reincarnation. The words in Faust, his greatest work, by the way, Faust, represents years of study and indicate the trend of Goethe's mind. Quote, this is the mystical poem. The soul of man is like water. From heaven it cometh, to heaven it mounteth, and thus again it must return to earth, forever changing. This belief is confirmed in a fragment written by Goethe in 1776 and directed to the object of his deep personal attachment, Frau von Stein, his love. Quote, tell me, what has fate in store for us? And why bound she us so close together? Ah, thou were in time long gone, my sister or my wife. So he says to his lover, to his love, that he felt deeply that at some time she was his sister or his mother or both. So we have a myriad here of these kinds of testaments from, we have Ralph Waldo Emerson, Schopenhauer, Huxley, Taylor, Dr. E.B. Taylor, Friedrich Nietzsche, especially Schopenhauer and Nietzsche. Nietzsche patterned so much of his philosophy after that of Schopenhauer, it's true, and seems to have accepted the doctrine of reincarnation. Quote from Nietzsche, my doctrine is, live so that thou mayest desire to live again. That is thy duty, for in any case thou wilt live again. So, two of the great persons of more modern times who have endorsed the doctrine of reincarnation is Tagore and Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi is one of the greatest men who have lived on earth in the last 500 years. His name will be remembered as long as history is recorded. He was a man of peace in a world of war, a man of integrity in a world dedicated to personal advantage. This little Hindu leader is living the law. By religion, a member of the Jain sect. Karma. End of chapter. So that's just to give you an idea of how seriously reincarnation has been taken by some of the greatest minds, thinkers, philosophers in history. It is not a ridiculous idea. It has lost favor in the West as it was excluded from the doctrines of Christianity and Judaism. So we have separated from the idea of reincarnation. So that's why I would like to bring our attention back to the idea of what reincarnation and what the idea of karma actually means. Because again, the Tarot, which is a method by which you can overcome time and yet find the kind of higher inspiration through the symbols in the cards so that you behave in a manner that is right or righteous, thus purifying your karma, perfecting your soul as you progress through the stages of life. The cycle of necessity, a summary of modern belief in reincarnation. So we've perused all the noted intellectual dignitaries of history who have embraced reincarnation. Now we move into a summary of the modern belief in reincarnation. The human life wave is made up of 60 billion spirits. 60 billion spirits or entities, souls. Of this number, at any particular period in history, portions of that 60 billion incarnate, making up the population of the earth. Right now, what is it? 6, 7, 8 billion? Quite of that 60 billion pool of souls. We continue. The spirit, ego, or self of the human being has been evolving through various forms and conditions for nearly 1,000 million years. Again, even in the earth realm, in the material realm, these spans of time really are equivalent to an infinity of time. How is it calculable? It's as if we have been here in this particular realm forever. But it does have a birth and a death. The time that we spend here on Earth in this realm as a species is limited, though these limits feel infinite. The vast period of time was used in the perfecting of the physical body as a medium for the expression of the entity in the physical world. The human body as we know it was first indistinguishable some 50 million years ago. At that time, the entity controlled the body by a sort of rudimentary nervous system, which it since has refined to its present degree of subtlety. It's talking about the actual physical evolution of the human body. At the time, the entity controlled the body by a rudimentary nervous system, which it since has refined to its present degree of subtlety. You see how the body itself is in an evolutionary process, ongoing, of perfecting the human body. About 25 million years ago, the division of the sexes, and this is interesting, the division of the sexes 25 million years ago brought about our ability to see and to think. Isn't it interesting how the division of the sexes would bring about these two qualities, which ultimately our sight is our most important sensory apparatus and has allowed us the kind of interaction with the physical realm. We share this with the animals as well, but thinking is really entirely a human function, at least to the degree that we have taken it. From that period when the sexes were divided, from that period to the present time, the entity, that is the human being, has been constantly refining the body, which serves as the vanity, bears witness to hundreds of millions of years of growth, which we see recapitulated in the embryo and fetus. And we can see the evolution of our bodies through the stages of animal development towards the human being that is, in a sense, almost like time-lapse photography, time-lapse video, speeding things up where you see it rapidly developing from one stage to the other. Millions of years of evolution lay ahead. It isn't over yet, is what it's saying. It ain't over yet. So man is becoming human slowly, but inevitably, because the subjective entity is constantly demanding better and more responsive organisms. The entire process through which the human being is passing in the mystery of growth may appropriately be termed the cycle of necessity. All growth is motivated, and listen, all growth is motivated by karma. That is action, reaction. Action, reaction. It is karma which makes reincarnation necessary. It is karma that makes reincarnation necessary. Man is eternally suffering, and misfortune is a constant goad, impelling him forward towards a more perfect state. Therefore, karma is the law. And reincarnation is the means by which that law is administered. So karma is the law of necessity, action, reaction. It is difficult for an average person to realize the full significance of an existence that is lived on planes other than that which may be described in physical terms. And that extends from the beginning to the end of time. But regardless of his actions, regardless of his virtues or vices, regardless even of his efforts to destroy himself, as we're about to try to do again on a global scale, regardless, we are here today doing the things we are doing today because of this sequence of lives. Man is an immortal, eternal being, manifesting through an infinite sequence of bodies, each a little nobler than the one before. The things that we are doing today will become the elements of later existences. And we will have bodies almost without end. Yet this is not fatalism in its doctrine. Somebody say, oh, well, after living this life, I don't think I want to do this again. I'd rather opt out, thank you. Or maybe it's better not to believe in any kind of existence after life if your life has been one of suffering. But you cannot escape the necessity of these cycles, because otherwise there's no point to your being at all. No point, no reason, no purpose, no principle behind it. Nothing. It's meaningless. You see? There is no fatalism in this doctrine. Each state and condition that comes to, there is no strange and distant God smiling upon us and frowning upon others. We are not the blind instrument of some fatal necessity. We are not marked by Adam's sin. Each of us bears witness to his own character, to the thoughts and actions of lives long past. Each of us is an architect of his own tomorrow. That's beautifully said. Each of us is an architect of his own tomorrow. You build your own tomorrow. You draw your own tomorrow. You paint your own tomorrow. Nobody else does. You can't push the responsibility onto someone else. It is ultimately your responsibility. That's the emphasis of this philosophy of reincarnation. It requires a little courage to acknowledge personal responsibility. The tarot is always asking you to take personal responsibility for your actions, to accept a belief that teaches that there is no escape from action or the consequences of action. It takes a high measure of resolve to be willing to face the world and to acknowledge that all the misfortunes which occur are the results of one's own mistakes. That's why the law of reincarnation and karma have always belonged to the wise and the strong, and by their very nature are not suitable for those who are less evolved, less capable of taking on that kind of burden of responsibility. In the words of a modern psychologist, it is inconceivable to the subconscious self that there ever was a time that it did not exist. I don't know if you've felt this or not, but I remember my first thoughts on hearing about the concept of death, that it was absurd. I remember at 5 years old thinking to myself, I have no way to express this, but I know that everyone is mistaken. It's impossible to have never been. Once you are, you have no beginning, no end. You live in an eternal state of being, inevitably. Though each person lives for today, he cannot comprehend the condition of not existing. Man, though living and dying, takes eternal existence for granted. Certainly we do. It would be hard to get up every day knowing that at any moment we could be annihilated, our souls snuffed out, and everything we thought, dreamt, become vanishes. That is a terrifying concept. Terrifying. No one can bear that, even if you're an atheist. You cannot, in your heart of hearts, bear the idea of annihilation. So, all of the higher purposes of man, his dreams of accomplishment, his noblest aspirations, and his most powerful ambitions demand eternity for their fulfillment. As we look about us upon the strange aggregation of creatures that make up society, we realize that no doctrine based upon the theory of a single life can solve the problems of the multitudes. For the majority, there is little vision. The future stretches out into a sort of mysterious and unknown expanse. Each of us, in his innermost heart of hearts, is aware of some great force that moves him relentlessly through the years towards the unknown. If you listen to these words, you're going to hear very much of the counsel that the tarot is giving us every single month to every single sign. We're constantly having to face the reality of the culture that we've been born into, the times we've been born into, and the karma that we ourselves have created. Man is a creature of many sorrows. Suffering is a common lot. Each in his own life knows the varied ills which arise in the chemistry of human relationships. Only the wise man, listen to this, only the wise man can be happy. For the rest, there are years of uncertainty. Why should a benign and all-knowing providence afflict many and bless a few? Why should some come into this world diseased and crippled, while others are born to every advantage? Why are some wise in childhood and others foolish in old age? Who loosed sin and death upon the world, that all the dreams we live, those dreams we live by, should come to an end and to common ruin? The church says that it is the will of God. Science says that it is the law of nature. But philosophy maintains that all these strange conditions are the growing pains of an immortal soul. Our suffering, the inequalities of life, are the strange conditions that are the growing pains of an immortal soul. The reason that our reason can embrace. These laws give purpose to action, meaning to existence. These same laws release man from the monotony of a daily routine, from the monotony of the daily routine, by giving him perspective and the power to see beyond the horizon of his present life. The tarot also does that. It lets you see beyond the horizon of the moment into a broader time span, so that you can prepare yourself and choose wisely in the moment. You're creating your karma. You're creating your reality each and every moment. And the tarot wants to bring that home to you. Practically every reading. Reincarnation and karma are the only explanations for the mystery of life that the reason can embrace. These laws give purpose to action, meaning to existence. The same laws release man from the monotony of daily routine by giving him perspective and the power to see beyond the horizon of his present life. When Buddha brought the doctrine of rebirth to India, it released millions of human beings from the hopelessness of a caste system, which gave opportunity to the highly born alone. When Pythagoras brought the same philosophy to Greece, it freed slaves long bound to the tradition of the Attic state. Pythagoras freed his own slaves, and one of them succeeded as the head of his academy. Reincarnation comes to our modern world as liberation from the caste system of special privilege. It destroys our illusional concept of wealth and poverty. It breaks down the barriers that exist between employer and employee. It gives us a vision beyond wealth, a vision towards some utopia to come, in which men will dwell together in a camaraderie of purpose. Those who know men best realize that when humanity in general recognizes the law of reincarnation, which is the only teaching that will explain the true meaning of things as they are, they will immediately become more zealous in their quickly putting the world in order. In the words of, and here's one personage we did not mention in the last chapter, Henry Ford cars, believe it or not. In the words of Henry Ford, quote, "I adopted the theory of reincarnation when I was 26 years old. Religion offered nothing to the point. At least I was unable to discover it." He further says, "Even work could not give me complete satisfaction. Work is futile if we cannot realize or utilize the experiences we collect in one life, in the next. When I discovered reincarnation, it was as if I had discovered a universal plan. I realized that there was a chance to work out my ideas. Time was no longer limited. I was no longer a slave to the hands of the clock. There was time enough to plan and to create. The discovery of reincarnation put my mind at ease. I was settled. I felt that order and progress were present in the mystery of life. I no longer looked elsewhere for the solution of the riddle of life. If you preserve a record of this conversation, write it so that it puts men's mind at ease. I would like to communicate to others the calmness that the long view of life gives us. We all retain, however faintly, memories of our past lives. We frequently feel that we have witnessed a scene or lived through a moment in some previous existence, but that this is not essential. It is the essence, the gist, the result of experience that are valuable and remain with us. End quote. That was Henry Ford. So these personages throughout history understood and were helped by the understanding of reincarnation and karma. Reincarnation and karma also light the dark mystery of ethics and morality. These laws give reason to right action, revealing every action is intimately related to the progress of the individual. We no longer do right because of the scriptural admonition, as in Islam or Judaism or Christianity. Again, reincarnation and karma also light the dark mystery of ethics and morality. These laws give reason to right action, revealing that every action is intimately related to the progress of the individual. Because we have learned the meaning of right and wrong as they react upon us through the law of karma. We grow through every thought and every action. We learn not for one life, but for eternity. Each art and science that we master becomes part of the immortal self, flowing through the ages. It is no longer difficult to understand how genius flows from the fountains of the past, how each of us brings into this life the essence of all that has gone before. One child may play the violin at 6. Another may lead symphony orchestras at 9. A third, a little boy in Burma, may teach the most profound of Buddhist doctrine at the age of 8. Reincarnation and karma alone explain these phenomena and explain also the hidden powers and impulses, characteristics, and traits which come with us into birth. Plato believed and taught that all learning was remembering. And the very word education originally meant to draw forth from which already was known. We all come into the world with abilities, talents, and peculiar aptitudes. We are destined to certain labors by karma, which we have brought with us out of the lives that have gone before. How noble then are the doctrines of reincarnation and karma. To be happy, primarily, but to learn. Life after life, we pass through complicated experiences until, in the fullness of living, we learn to grow happily. Happiness is a byproduct of our harmonious adjustment to the universal plan. Let me repeat that. Happiness is the byproduct of our harmonious adjustment to the universal plan. Where do we exist then between lives is the question. What is the subjective state? Is the entity in heaven or in hell? The philosopher replies that whether living or dead, man is always himself. For a time, he manifests objectively, taking into himself the experiences of the outer world. And then, for another space of time, he is subjective, assimilating into his soul the power that these experiences in his physical existence have. But also, beyond that, you take on the role of other people that you've interacted with to see the experience, the event from their perspective. Something you can't do here. Now, granted that the experience is still the central core of what is being used to help you evolve. But there are ways of experiencing what we experience here now in this life that we cannot approach even unless we are between lives. And in these between intervals, between lives, much growth can happen as we explore the experiences of life and dissect it, reassemble it, incorporate it. You see? So, what it's saying, let's me go back to where I left off. According to the doctrine of rebirth, we may add nothing new to ourselves in the intervals between lives. During this time, we examine, order, and classify the experiences we have gained. We make them part of an immortal self that, enriched with experiences, proceeds into another body. There are some who, hypnotized by physical existence, struggle to hold the possessions of their physical lives. Having achieved wealth, honor, power, they forget that these temporal glories have small place in the universal plan. It is the purpose of the universe that all men should inevitably outgrow physical things. Man should realize that the inner life alone is real and permanent, and all else belongs to the sphere of illusion. One of the duties of rebirth is to one of the duties of rebirth is to sever man's will from the objects of his physical attention. As we come of age, we leave the world behind, finding nothing in the material state to be of value except the experience of self-mastery. Here again, the Tarot is constantly talking about self-mastery. And this is how these two philosophies intertwine, support each other, aid each other. The cycle of necessity is the endless cycle of rebirths. To be born, to die, and to be born again, century after century, age after age, until the very end of time mingles with eternity. The cycle of necessity is symbolized in the East by a spinning wheel. In the Tarot, the Wheel of Fortune. A spinning wheel to which human beings cling tenaciously. The ignorant cling to the smaller life they know, while the enlightened pass on to a larger life they have come to understand is there. The cycle of necessity is the symbolic name is the symbolic name which represents the great time and effort, the period of striving after truth, through which each entity must pass. The laws of incarnation and karma make possible the constant progress of all living beings. Not only does man grow, but the sticks, stones, and stars grow with him. All are unfolding together. All life is growing up in space and towards space. The cycle of necessity ends at some distant, incalculable time, and life, having fulfilled the pilgrimage of uncertainty, comes at last to the end. This end, the Buddhists call nirvana, and the Christians call heaven. But names mean nothing. All such terms merely represent rest after labor, peace at the end of seeking. So I think that's a lot to digest, an awful lot to digest. And if you have questions, as I hope you do, please include it in a super chat, and I will make a separate video on those questions, each and every one that I receive. I want to tell you that I think that that's enough for one time. I was going to continue, but the heaviness of these ideas are something that we have to keep in mind. I don't want you to feel in any way overwhelmed, but the next time that we come together, what we're going to do is we're going to peruse the idea of reincarnation in the animal kingdom. Animals also the different spiritual reality behind each of their manifestations into a physical form. So next video, next slide, and then we'll also peruse reincarnation world. You wouldn't think that plants reincarnate, but in a fashion and then we'll explore reincarnation in the mineral world, rocks, gems, crystals. They also have a reincarnational cycle, very different from the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom, and of course, extremely different from the human being. But we will also explore reincarnation in nations and in races. Nations and races. Races have, and nations, cities, states, people who have been together as a community often reincarnate together. So that will be our next. I hope you've enjoyed this. I think that there's no more vital subject than the nature of our existence here in this realm as it relates to our eternal spirit, our eternal soul. The adoption of this philosophy of reincarnation and karma is not easy. I realize that. It's not easy. That's why listening to a tarot reading that's sort of trying to put you back on the path, onto a spiritual path, is fundamental to your spirit's evolution. Our consciousness is evolving as our body is evolving. And the struggles, the suffering that you experience is that hard anvil that you're forging, purifying your soul against. And to know this is to be really released from the feeling of being inconsequential, purposeless, of being insignificant, And the word insignificant is, I think, something that is at the very heart of modern mental illness. People are in a state of total dejection because they feel that their life is purposeless, that they're having. So they sort of let life happen to them, not realizing that there is a power within you to actually create the life that you way, to beat back the relentless power of karma, the karma that shows you your experience, what your choices, what your decisions, what your mental framework of ideas and your mind, your thoughts, your actions, and beat back the relentless imposition of karma. And you only do that by always, always, always being good, being loving, compassionate. Let's end there. Thank you. Namaste. I hope to see you again. So let's turn this off somehow.